Deep within the thick coastal brush of the Yucatan, Aztec spies crouch in silence as the horizon fractures. 11 floating mountains carved from dark wood and heavy canvas touch the golden sand of the Mexican coast. The air carries a strange metallic scent of iron mixed with the heavy, musky smell of horses that have never walked these lands. 508 men step onto the beach, their polished breastplates catching the blinding sun like mirrors. Hernán Cortés stands at the center, feeling the oppressive weight of his velvet robes against the rising tropical heat. He watches the local messengers turn and vanish into the jungle, carrying reports that will soon reach the heart of the world. The era of the Aztec sun begins its final, bloody descent. 200 miles inland, the city of Tenochtitlan rises from the center of Lake Texcoco like a white hallucination. This is the heart of the Triple Alliance, a sprawling metropolis home to over 200,000 souls living in the shadow of great pyramids. The Great Temple stands as a mountain of stone, its stairs stained with the dark copper smell of ritual sacrifice meant to keep the universe turning. Moctezuma II sits on a throne of woven mats, ruling over 5 million subjects through a network of fear and heavy tribute. Golden jewelry and brightly colored feathers from the distant jungle flow into the capital every single day. Yet, the emperor feels a cold shiver of dread as he listens to the reports of the strangers on the coast. Back on the coast, the Spanish soldiers whisper about mutiny and the safety of Cuba. But Cortés acts with brutal finality. He orders his carpenters to strip the ships of their nails and ropes before scuttling them in the shallow surf. One by one, the vessels that brought them here disappear beneath the waves, leaving the expedition with no path for retreat. The sound of splintering wood and the sight of smoke rising from the Veracruz beach seal their fate forever. Now, 508 men stand alone against a continent of millions with only their iron swords and 15 horses for survival. Cortés turns his back on the ocean and looks toward the mountains, fueled by a dangerous ambition that will either grant him a kingdom or a grave. The expedition pushes through the freezing mountain passes where the air grows thin and the wind bites like a serrated blade. They encounter the Tlaxcalans, a fierce, independent nation that has resisted Aztec domination for generations. A massive battle erupts, the air filled with the whistle of obsidian-edged clubs and the deafening thunder of Spanish arquebuses. The smell of sulfur and wet earth clogs the nostrils of the dying as iron meets stone in a desperate struggle. Recognizing a shared enemy, the Tlaxcalan leaders decide to gamble their entire future on these bearded strangers from the sea. They offer thousands of warriors to march alongside the Spanish, turning a small band of explorers into a terrifying catalyst for an indigenous civil war that Moctezuma II cannot possibly ignore. The combined army crests a final mountain ridge, and a silence falls over the ranks of the armored conquistadors. Below them stretches the Valley of Mexico, a shimmering expanse of water and white stone cities that looks like a dream. The soldiers grip their pikes as they gaze at the vast lake of Texcoco, where Tenochtitlan floats like a crown of jewelry. Massive causeways bridge the water, crowded with thousands of canoes carrying salt, corn, and flowers to the markets. The sight is so grand that some veterans wonder if they have entered a world from a romance novel. They march down into the heat of the valley, the sound of their steel boots ringing against the stone roads, drawing closer to the heart of the Aztec soul. On a narrow causeway crossing the deep water, two civilizations finally collide in a scene of absolute, suffocating tension. Moctezuma arrives on a litter decorated with gold and green quetzal feathers, surrounded by nobles who keep their eyes strictly on the ground. The air is thick with the scent of burning copal incense and thousands of crushed flowers thrown under the emperor's feet. Cortés dismounts from his horse, the animal snorting and shifting in the humid air, as he attempts to embrace the man he considers a king. A shock ripples through the Aztec court as the Spanish touch the sacred body of the emperor for the first time. In this moment, the gold of the old world and the obsidian of the new are locked in a fatal, polite embrace. Inside the palace of Axayacatl, the Spanish live in a state of constant paranoid alert despite the gifts of luxury and food. Cortés realizes that his small force is trapped within a city of hundreds of thousands and decides on a desperate move. He walks into the royal chambers and seizes Moctezuma, forcing the emperor to move into the Spanish quarters as a hostage. The most powerful man in the Americas now sits in a room guarded by iron-clad soldiers, his authority slowly evaporating in the eyes of his people. Outside, the city hums with a growing, dangerous resentment as the citizens realize their ruler has become a puppet. The smell of fear permeates the palace walls as the Spanish begin to demand vast sums of gold as a ransom. The Spanish discover a secret room filled from floor to ceiling with the accumulated wealth of the Aztec ancestors. For weeks, the sound of hammers on sacred jewelry fills the courtyard as the conquistadors begin their systematic destruction. They build massive clay furnaces to melt down priceless artifacts into portable gold bars stamped with the seal of the Spanish king. Thousands of years of history and craftsmanship vanish into the liquid fire, reduced to mere currency for a distant empire. The smell of soot and melting metal hangs over the palace as the soldiers count their shares with greedy, trembling hands. They do not realize that this gold is becoming a heavy burden that will soon cost many of them their lives in the cold waters of the lake. While Cortés is away on the coast, his lieutenant Pedro de Alvarado watches thousands of Aztec nobles gather for a religious festival. The air vibrates with the rhythm of drums and the singing of high-pitched ritual chants in the great temple square. Panic seizes the Spanish commander as he imagines the ritual is a prelude to a massive attack against his small garrison. He orders his men to block the exits and draw their steel swords, turning the sacred dance into a literal slaughterhouse. The smell of fresh copper and the screams of the unarmed nobility fill the square as the Spanish hack through cotton armor and skin. This single moment of cowardice breaks the final thread of peace, and the city of Tenochtitlan erupts in a vengeful, screaming rage. Under a heavy cover of midnight rain and shadow, the Spanish attempt to flee the city across a narrow, broken causeway. Their pockets are heavy with the stolen gold bars that weigh them down as they move through the dark. Suddenly, the silence is shattered by the sound of conch shells and the splashing of thousands of Aztec war canoes. The lake becomes a chaotic graveyard as soldiers are pulled into the freezing water by the very treasure they refuse to leave behind. Many conquistadors drown in the mud, their lungs filling with lake water as they sink under the weight of their iron and gold. Cortés reaches the mainland and sits beneath a cypress tree, weeping for the hundreds of men he has lost in the dark, rainy night. As the Spanish survivors retreat to the safety of Tlaxcala, an invisible and far more terrifying enemy begins to ravage the Aztec capital. Smallpox, carried in the blood of a single infected slave, spreads through the crowded streets of Tenochtitlan like a wildfire. The virus kills nearly half of the city's population within months, leaving the streets filled with the sickly sweet smell of decay. Moctezuma's successor dies of the fever, leaving the empire leaderless and broken as the people struggle to even bury their dead. Biology achieves what iron swords could not, stripping the Aztec resistance of its strength and its hope. The great temple stands silent in the sun, surrounded by a city of the dying who have no medicine for this foreign, microscopic plague from across the sea. Cortés returns 1 year later with a massive force of Tlaxcalan allies and 13 custom-built ships to dominate the lake. He cuts the causeways and prevents any food or fresh water from reaching the island city, beginning a brutal siege of attrition. The smell of stagnant water and the sight of starving children define the final months of the once great capital. Aztec warriors continue to fight with desperate courage, but they are slowly consumed by hunger and the relentless fire of Spanish cannons. The white stones of the city turn gray with ash and blood as the Spanish push house by house toward the center. The lake is choked with the bodies of the fallen, and the water that once fed millions now becomes a stagnant grave for an entire civilization's dreams. The final stand takes place in the district of Tlatelolco, where the last emperor, Cuauhtémoc, is captured while attempting to flee in a canoe. He is brought before Cortés, his face haggard from months of starvation and the weight of a dying empire. The young ruler asks to be killed with the Spaniard's dagger, a final request for dignity in the face of absolute defeat. An eerie, heavy silence falls over the ruins of Tenochtitlan as the fighting finally stops after 2 years of total war. The empire that once ruled 5 million people has vanished into the smoke and the rubble of its own pyramids. Cortés stands among the ruins, realizing that he has destroyed the very prize he sought to own, leaving only the smell of ash and the cries of survivors. The Spanish begins the systematic reconstruction of the land, using the rubble of the Great Temple to build the foundations of a cathedral. Mexico City rises from the ashes of Tenochtitlan, its wide colonial plazas hiding the ruins of the Aztec past beneath feet of dirt. The smell of lime mortar and fresh cedar wood replaces the scent of incense as the new colonial order takes root. Under the encomienda system, the survivors are forced into labor, mining the very earth for more silver and gold for the Spanish crown. The landscape changes as European pigs and sheep graze on lands that once grew corn and beans for the Triple Alliance. A new world is being built directly over the corpses of the old, fueled by a relentless and hungry colonial ambition. In the town squares, Spanish priests gather the painted codices and folding books that hold the entire history of the Aztec people. They see these records as the work of the devil and order them to be cast into massive public bonfires. The air is filled with the sight of centuries of astronomy, genealogy, and poetry, turning into swirling black ash and smoke. Only a handful of these precious documents survive the flames, leaving a permanent void in the collective memory of the human race. The sensory reality of an entire intellectual world is erased in a single generation by the heat of religious zeal. The survivors watch in silent grief as the colors and stories of their ancestors disappear into the gray sky, replaced by the Latin script of their new masters. While Cortés has conquered an empire, the bureaucrats and lawyers in Spain begin a different kind of war against his growing power. King Charles V fears that the successful conqueror will crown himself Emperor of Mexico and begins to strip him of his authority. Cortés is replaced by a royal viceroy and finds himself entangled in a web of legal battles and mounting debts that drain his fortune. The man who once commanded thousands now walks through the halls of the Spanish court as an aging, bitter petitioner seeking recognition. He discovers that the crown is far more efficient at seizing power than he was at winning it. The smell of dusty parchment and the cold ink of royal decrees prove to be more powerful than the steel of any conquistador's blade. In the centuries that follow, a new biological and cultural reality emerges from the violent collision of Spain and the Americas. The survivors of the plague and the war begin to intermarry with the Spanish settlers, birthing a new mestizo identity that defines modern Mexico. The languages, religions, and flavors of two separate hemispheres merge into a vibrant and unique culture that still carries the scars of its birth. Tortillas are served alongside pork, and the Virgin of Guadalupe is honored on the same sites where Aztec goddesses once stood. This accidental nation is the true legacy of the disaster, a fusion of blood and spirit that could only have been born from total destruction. The gold of the conquistadors has long since vanished, but the people remain as a living, breathing hybrid world. Today, the modern metropolis of Mexico City hums with the energy of 20 million people, yet Tenochtitlan remains a ghost beneath the pavement. Excavations occasionally reveal the massive stone serpent heads and obsidian knives that have slept in the dark for 500 years. The gold is gone, the pyramids are dust, and the names of the conquistadors are often spoken with a mixture of awe and resentment. The story of Hernán Cortés and Moctezuma serves as a permanent reminder of how quickly a world can end when two civilizations collide. The scars of those 2 years in the 16th century continue to define the identity of an entire continent. History remains alive in the stones and the blood, a silent witness to the explorer who destroyed an empire and birthed a nation.